Hello and welcome. Today we'll be discussing treatments of Alzheimer's disease. Particularly, we'll be looking at a paper titled Alzheimer's Disease Treatment Challenges for the Future, written by John Hardy. The PowerPoint will basically be just talking about the therapies that are available for Alzheimer's disease and what the current progress is. So let's just jump right into it. So, to understand the paper that we're going to be talking about, we have to understand what amyloid hypothesis is. Now, if you looked at my other videos, I kind of talked about this a little bit more, but just in short, amyloid hypothesis is a type of idea right now that is essentially saying that Alzheimer's disease is essentially caused by the buildup of amyloid beta proteins. What are these proteins? Amyloid beta is basically a type of protein that's produced inside the brain, and usually it's supposed to be produced and then cleared out right away. But with people who have Alzheimer's disease, this production leads to accumulation, and accumulation eventually will lead to decline or cognitive decline because the aggregates of the proteins kind of just coalesce outside the neurons and they kind of just help it make it hard for neurons to communicate with each other. Over time, that will lead to necrosis and eventually neuropathology defined by neuronal death. So, before discussing, let's discuss how researchers come to this treatment pathway. The hypothesis claims that Alzheimer's disease gets worse with amyloid beta buildup. So, in this, based on this hypothesis, the researchers are looking for drugs that are going to be clearing this amyloid beta protein from the synaptical space. So currently, there's two drugs that are known to do this. One is known as lecanemab, and the other one's called donanemab. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but this is how I'm going to pronounce them. So they're kind of so lecanemab goes under the drug name Leqembi, and donanemab is classified under Kisunla. So both of these drugs are intravenous, and current patients who have mild cognitive impairment or early stage Alzheimer's disease will essentially come in and will get this injection intravenously. So they'll get it via IV infusion, and essentially when so they will need to basically have a doctor to do this kind of infusions. They can't have anybody do it, but a doctor, and it's very costly, as you can see. This is a pulled up from an article from 2003 that stated that people who are on this treatment, if they're not covered, they basically would have to pay $26,500 per year. And the effectiveness of these drugs tends to clear out amyloid beta by 25 to 30%. And this is just basically based on if everything is correct. So this is based on a trial that was done whereby it cleared 25 to 30% in 18 months. But the only problem is amyloid always seems to come back. It always seems to accumulate back. So that's kind of the main problem here. It's been shown that it kind of with the clearing of the amyloid, some of the symptoms that are associated with Alzheimer's disease kind of reduce, but it doesn't completely kind of reverse the damage that's already been done. All it does is just kind of it's more of like a band-aid solution that we know. So it's not the research is still ongoing on finding a very, very effective treatment for this disease. And one of the biggest problems with this is understanding whether it is the amyloid that's causing the disease or whether it's tau tangles. Because we also know that it's from the, if you just go look back at my previous videos, I talked about Alzheimer's disease and what causes the cognitive decline. So you have amyloid beta, which is the protein that I just explained that coalesces outside of the neuron, and then you have neurofibrillary tangles. These are proteins that are inside the neurons and are causing damage. They're basically small proteins called tau that usually are chain linked within the microtubules, and they become defective when a phosphate group is attached to them, and then they become hyperphosphorylated, causing aggregation of those tau proteins inside the neurons, and then that's kind of like it leads to like a double whammy where you have aggregation outside and aggregation inside. So current research is just kind of trying to understand whether it's amyloid beta that's doing it or whether it's tau tangles that are doing it. So it's just kind of finding a good balance between the two, a treatment that can do both. But so far, the ones that are approved that can be used are these ones, lecanemab and donanemab. They're not clearing it, but they're reducing the symptoms. Another problem that has been found with these treatments, unfortunately, is a condition known as ARIA, or more specifically, amyloid related imaging abnormality. So, this is a side effect that has been noticed when using these treatments, especially among people who have ApoE4 homozygous. So, what does ApoE4 homozygous mean? ApoE4 is a gene that has been characterized within the Alzheimer's literature as a gene that usually leads to Alzheimer's disease. It is usually more common with people who have both copies, so they get one copy from the dad, one copy from the mom. And if they both have those copies, they're more likely to have the disease. And with this condition, ARIA, it's been found that if you give these treatments, donanemab and lecanemab, to these people, what happens is you have a inflammation that happens within the vessels. So usually people who have ApoE4 they tend to have a lot more amyloid buildup, and that amyloid buildup sometimes can happen within the blood vessel walls. So how this treatment works is they're basically antibodies, and they are antibodies that go around looking for amyloid beta proteins, and then they attach them, and then they send them for clearing. So they kind of help the immune cells within the brain, known as microglia, pick them up and then clear them out of the system. So if these antibodies see a lot of the amyloid beta buildup inside the blood vessel walls, they will coalesce and they will clump onto them, and this can lead to inflammation, usually microhemorrhages or uh, some some sort of inflammation that kind of just is very abnormal. Usually, it's not too bad. It's kind of transient, but it is nonetheless something that is seen with people who have people who take these medications. So a drug shuttle has been kind of uh, it has been developed. It's known as trotinimab. What it's supposed to do is it's supposed to kind of act as a shuttle service that will basically take these monoclonal antibodies found in the two drugs we discussed earlier and shuttle them into the blood-brain barrier, and therefore allowing it to kind of just allowing the monoclonal antibodies to just attack the amyloids that are within the nervous system area rather than the blood vessels, therefore reducing the amount of inflammation that's found in the blood vessels. But this is still new and is still in trials right now, so it's not perfect, but it's this. There's just kind of like something that's been found for it. So the study, as I stated, is Alzheimer's disease treatment challenges for the future. What this guy basically, it was a very, very short study, but his conclusion was that although a corner in Alzheimer's therapy has been turned, there's still a long road ahead in terms of getting adequate therapies to all. So we don't know what the therapies are. We don't have good therapies yet. The road ahead, however, is largely practical rather than conceptual. And I think these therapies and their successes will continue to make inroads into the treatment of the disease, which is very important. This is just this. These treatments are kind of giving us a baseline by which we can start in trying to alleviate this disease. One important scientific concern relates to the underlying pathogenesis. These therapies depend on reactivating the microglia. One aspect of disease seems to be microglial exhaustion, which is the immune system that I told you about earlier. Microglial exhaustion is whereby microglia are kind of stimulated to the point where they are overstimulated because there is so much destruction happening within the brain. They're dealing with a lot of issues. You have neurofibrillary tangles causing neurons to die out, and then you have a lot of amyloid beta that are kind of built up within the neuronal space, and that can cause a lot of inflammation around the neuronal space because the microglia are kind of fighting them back. So they're producing factors, reactive oxygen species, things that they know will kill whatever they think is a pathogen, which is the amyloid beta. But those reactive oxygen species are also causing further damage to the neurons as well as the microglia. So that essentially what would happen because of that is microglial exhaustion, because they're just kind of constantly working, trying to figure out what the problem is here. Because there's too much aggregation happening that is uncommon, and it will only be with long-term drug administration when we learn whether it is possible to permanently push back the encroaching failure. So we don't know what the side effects of these drugs are. They've just been approved in Canada last year, October 25th, 2025. Health Canada approved lecanemab, not donanemab. So we still have a long way to in understanding what the effectiveness of these drugs might be and whether there's further side effects that can come from them. So this is just a short video, and hopefully you learned something from it. I'm going to be bringing out more about what the treatments are, and hopefully and discussing a little bit more in depth as to why we don't have any major treatments for tangles, even though I think tangles finding a treatment for tangles and amyloid beta might be like the way to go. Thanks for watching.